Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Political Frenemies. Great to have you with us. I'm Mathew Hulbert, a Lib Dem activist and a former Lib Dem councillor. We'll get to our wonderful guest in just a second, but first of all, I'd best say hello to him over there, Dr. Chris Newton, academic, former Tory defence advisor to the Conservatives the last time they were in opposition. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've got a quick factual question for you. What happened on the 3rd of November 2024? It was a momentous day in British political history. Do you know, Matthew?
Go on.
We published our pilot episode. It's coming up to our first anniversary. So next week will be our first sort of anniversary edition. So we've managed to get this far.
Hey, Chris, whoever thought we'd make it a year?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You survived. You guys managed to survive a year. And how long has Rory and Alistair been doing it for?
Oh, they've been going on. They've been going on forever. And George and Ed and all of those people. But yes, the person that you've just heard there is my wonderful friend, Andy Chandler, the Yellow Rebel. And if you're not already following his YouTube, you should, because I guess I would say this because I'm quite often a guest on it, but it's a wonderful YouTube channel, and is producing some great content on politics and tier list. We did if you've not seen mine and Andy's tier list on post-war prime ministers, you definitely should. It was so. I mean, you may not agree with either of us, but it's so much fun. Andy, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you both so much for having me on. I'm just coming off the back of an all-nighter where I did a live stream of the Caerphilly by-election with our good friend, Councillor Michael Mullaney. And it ended up being my best watched video. It's clocked up 4.4 thousand views on YouTube, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm both tired, but also a little bit euphoric from that buzz. So I'm very much looking forward to discussing this week's in politics. And because it is spooky season, because I've been such a loyal follower of the channel, one could say I'm your number one fan. So just call me Annie Wilkes if you know your Stephen King references.
Well, you absolutely are our number. Yeah, go on.
And before that, Matthew, I've got a gift for you. I've got a gift for you right here, because I know you are such a big state socialist. And I think on my next visit to Hinkley, I want to give you this. I felt like it was so appropriate for you.
Don't set Chris off, honestly.
It's been collecting dust, and I thought, why not? This is perfect for Mathew Hulbert.
Comrade
that
Matthew.
That looks very warm.
It's very warm. Yeah. If you don't mind embarrassing yourself with the...
I don't know if any of you saw, and I don't know, for folks who won't have seen this, they can go to my social media and have a look from yesterday. But yesterday I was looking very country tweedy. Did you see?
I did see, Matthew. It was very Lib Dem of you. I imagine.
I thought it was very Tory of me, actually.
You had the three lines on your coat. It's only a matter of time now. Only a matter of time before you vote. When you come to our side.
Never. So Andy, tell us a little bit. But for folks who don't know, tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel.
Yes, so I've always wanted to do a political YouTube channel. I was inspired by, so I don't know how many of your audience know these names, but these are quite big names in the kind of political YouTube community. So there's people like Jimmy the Giant. These are going to be very interesting names for you both. So Jimmy the Giant, A Different Bias. And what they do is that they tend to do video essays on politics. And what I wanted to do originally was to was to basically do video essays, video diaries of the rolling news that was happening. But I realised, I work full time, and I realised that was just going to be very impractical, because it would mean having to keep myself up to date with the news, having to go and record it in my own free time, editing as well. And I just thought it would just look like slop if I couldn't commit my full time to that. So I decided to move things a bit, and basically the main focus of the channel is that we debate topics. So much like how you and Chris do debates on and panel discussions on the week's events, I do it on more political history, political figures, and philosophy, policy. So we had one about the wealth tax that we did with Luke George that time. We did one on Margaret Thatcher. And then we did another one about the coalition years. So it's less to do about the week's news in politics, and more about the legacy of these political events and figures. And then since then, I've been doing interviews with people. I interviewed yourself, Mathew. I interviewed Michael Mullaney, and I plan to do another interview with someone who has his own podcast as well, called Emergency Podcast, which I'm going to give a little plug out there. I think you should definitely check those guys out. And he's been very supportive of both of Political Frenemies and my show. And then I was saying to you, Mathew, I think my channel's had a little bit of an identity crisis, because I originally conceived it to talk about politics from a Liberal Democrat perspective. And I want to sort of go back to those roots again. So I plan to do a series where I discuss about Liberal leaders. So I plan to make a series in which with myself and a guest panelist discuss a Liberal leader and talk about their life, their impact in Liberal Party politics, and so that's basically the basic premise of the show.
Well, it's fantastic, and I think the wonderful thing about YouTube, and obviously we find that as well, is that it's such a kind of freeing platform in that as long as you're not saying things which are actionable or whatever, it's a free platform to pretty much say what you want, and you will find an audience. If what you're putting out has some quality, even if folks disagree with the points being made, which sometimes they will and sometimes they won't, the fact is that you will find an audience if what you're putting out is good stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I originally lifted the idea from a different bias. So he's a channel where he's a Labour member himself. So as the name says, he has his own bias. But he's independently minded, like yourself, Mathew. But what I wanted to do originally was to do what he did, which is why he does daily videos. He drops 3 videos a day in which he discusses the day's news and giving his own thoughts. He's a science teacher. That used to be his profession. But now he does it full time, and I think that's just absolutely fantastic.
And he has a team, right, that help him.
No, you're thinking of. I've shown you that YouTube. You're thinking of Simon Whistler. He does a lot of stuff. He's got multiple channels. No, Paul. I forgot his last name, but a different bias. No, he just has his one channel, but he's been very successful. He's had quite a steady a sort of loyal base, and I just think it's great that you get these people, who, like we're doing right now, they sit and record in the comfort of their own homes, and they're able to make a steady career out of it, and to talk about the things that they're passionate about, and like I said, I want to give my channel a bit more of identity. So I think going into the next couple of weeks, I plan to sort of look back at Liberal leaders of the political past. So just to give it a little bit more of an identity. Yeah, absolutely.
And you very kindly asked me to be part of one or two of those, which I'm really happy about. And it's that's why it's a pleasure to have you on our channel, because obviously I've been blessed to be on yours many times. So that's great. And actually, I know this might be a bit weird because obviously I'm the one hosting this week, but I feel that Chris should be the one to ask us about our new venture. So Chris, I'm handing over to you now.
Yeah, Mathew, I hear that you're kind of ditching me, aren't you?
As if I'd ever ditch you, Chris. So I would never ever do that. But no, we've just got an addition to. Yeah, go on, Andy.
If there's a vacancy, I'll join you, Chris. I'll be your new co-host.
Not yet. But no. So this is an addition podcast, and this is a whole new channel. It's got its own YouTube channel, and we're also on Spotify. We're working on being on Apple Podcasts. But this is the Mathew and Andy podcast. I know, original name, right? But basically, this is a new podcast where literally over a cuppa, we sit there with our tea or coffee, and we chat. And we've kind of subheaded it, politics, pop culture, and people. And that is basically what we talk about on the pod. We do a bit on politics because obviously, me and Andy are political obsessives. But we also talk about, friendship. We talk about family. We talk about life, love, and loss. We talk a bit about pop culture and what we're watching, reading, and listening to. And it's just a cozy chat over a cuppa, right, Andy?
Absolutely, it's just like a nice cozy chat over a cuppa, like you said, and just get to see more of the personalities of the people that you see on social media, and they are popular. People do enjoy watching that. I don't know what it is about viewing habits and people just enjoying learning about these strange. I mean, I watched this great American couple. They're a lesbian couple, and they do basically what we're going to be starting to do now for the Mathew and Andy pod, and they do reaction videos. And I just like it's that goggle box phenomenon. I can't say the word, but. Why do people enjoy that? I don't know, but I do enjoy it myself. And it's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so the first one is out. The first Mathew and Andy pod is out. Hopefully, Chris, bless him, when he does all the technical bits, once this is recorded, we'll put a link to our. He's very kind. He will do that, bless him. To our first podcast, and we're already on X. We hope to be on other social media as well soon. Again, I need to thank. I thank Chris, and I need to also thank Andy because. I come on and do the gob on a stick bit, right, and give my opinions. But it's you two, respectively, that does all of the technical stuff and all of the editing. So thank you very much to you both. I'd be no one without you. But yeah, so the first Mathew and Andy is out into the world. We hope it gets a really good reception. We hope that people like it. We do like to think of it as a cozy cuppa or a cozy jumper or something that you can just watch and. It's nothing particularly controversial, but it's two very dear friends having.
I mean, you are on the show, so it's always controversial.
I have this reputation for somehow being controversial. I don't know how I've gained it, but yeah, Chris, I hope at some point in your busy week you'll give us a watch or a listen.
Yeah, so I mean, I've started, but yeah, definitely, and it'll be. Good to see how you handle another sort of co-host, Mathew. But one thing I should say to Andy, Andy from I think day one has been extremely supportive of this podcast, and he's been really good in terms of promoting us and recommending us. So he hasn't been paid for any of it, by the way. Nope. But I should.
I'm not. I'm looking for that invoice.
but we should say thanks very much for your support, and we do really appreciate it.
Definitely.
I only support the best. I only support the best.
Andy, oh bless him. And by that he's on about me, Chris, not you. But no. So folks, do please go and and check us out over on Mathew and Andy, or if you find us on socials or indeed our individual socials, you'll be able to find us and check out that first episode. So yes, Chris. So and I should just point out this is once a fortnight that we're doing this, and the great thing was that we actually recorded the first step last weekend when Andy was visiting me. So we were both sat here in my kitchen recording it. So yeah, it was great.
You can't get more cosy than doing it in a kitchen, I say. Yeah.
Very homely. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, so folks, do please go and check us out over there. Do all the internet things. Do like, do subscribe, do tell your friends, as I always say for you to do about Political Frenemies as well. So not yet abandoning you, Chris. I mean, we'll see how things pan out. But no, it's just really exciting. And look, podcast and YouTube and all of this stuff, it's the way to go. It's the new media. I was thinking this the other day. How many people sit and watch linear TV anymore? It's very rare that I do that. Even when I'm physically watching, the physical television, I'm often either watching YouTube or I'm watching Netflix or I'm watching one of these things. It's actually very rare that I sit and think I'm going to sit and watch something that is being broadcast now on the TV.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, definitely YouTube is the way to go, and podcasting.
Absolutely. Well, right. So what are we talking about this week? So we're going to be talking about the issues surrounding Prince Andrew and more the political fallout around that. So we'll be talking about that. Another very serious issue, we're going to be talking about the Grooming gang inquiry in crisis. That's been a big issue this week. And we'll be talking about the Caerphilly Senedd by-election. And also, I've said to Chris as well that I want to add on. I want to talk about Lib Dem by-election success in local elections. And Chris was like, do we really have to talk about that? And I said, yes, we do. We do have to talk about that. So if you're all ready, let's do it. Okay, so let's start with the issue that is engulfing the royal family at the moment. And as much as the government wants not to have to deal with it, they are the government, and ultimately, the government and Parliament as a whole are having to confront this issue. And that is the increasing controversy surrounding Prince Andrew. Now, there's this weird thing that he still is officially, at the moment, he still is officially the Duke of York. All he said is that he won't use that title. But this is part of why there's a controversy that a growing number of MPs are saying, no, that's not good enough. You need to be formally renounced of those titles. And in fact, some are saying, and I'll perhaps get into a little bit later on why I agree with them on this, that why should he still be a prince? Why can he not just be Mr. Andrew Windsor? And so I'll get you two's thoughts on that in a second. Ed Davey asked a question about this at Prime Minister's Questions, and a number of other MPs, including the SNP leader at Westminster, are making an issue of this. Chris, from your perspective, I mean, obviously, I should just point out, Prince Andrew denies the allegations that are made against him very fervently, and so we should point that out. But over and above that, there's no doubt that he's brought controversy to the royal family, which is an institution which likes to suggest that it's kind of morally superior to the rest of us, and that it doesn't get embroiled in these types of things. Well, Prince Andrew has brought that to their door, and so Chris, this is tricky for the royal family, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite difficult to talk about because, as you said, Prince Andrew denies all the allegations, but he has just kind of lost the use of those titles, as you said, and of course you have that out of court settlement as well. But at the same time, no one can say that that there has been kind of official convictions or anything like that, and Prince Andrew sort of firmly denies it. So it leaves us in a grey zone where some action has been taken, but but others, as you say, the Lib Dems, Greens, nationalist MPs are pushing, for more action to be taken from him. I mean, obviously the whole allegations. I mean, it's definitely not good for the royal family. I think the impression I get that both the King and Prince William, do want to, take action and really kind of draw a line under this. And I suppose, I mean, at the moment, how many MPs have signed the early day motion? It's still quite a handful. So I'm not quite sure whether whether this campaign will gain any traction. But it depends on what else comes out, I suppose, and what other allegations that might come out.
Well, that's right, and I'm sure that our friends in the Fourth Estate are busy beavering away to see if there is anything else to come out. But also, Andy, there's also been raised this week, kind of a joint to this or adjacent to it, the issue of this mansion that he lives in, but apparently doesn't pay rent on, or pays like I think it's literally a peppercorn rent that he pays, and I think people think. And I have to say, it does make me smile. So, look, I should declare my colours for those that don't know. I'm a Republican, as in the anti-monarchist type of Republican. I believe we should have an elected head of state. But I used to be on the governing body of Republic to campaign for an elected head of state. So this has been my long-held view. But it really cracks me up that people are now finally starting to question, some of the wealth and some of the privilege and some of the trappings that the royal family are very fortunate to live in. And so, there's this question, Andy, I don't know how much of it you followed, about whether he should still be residing in this building or not.
Yeah, I think Lisa Smart actually raised this particular issue, and it has got quite a few Lib Dems who also agree, and there's definitely question marks about whether he should be living in this sort of estate rent free. I think coming back on the topic, I mean, they often call, the royal family often call themselves the firm, and branding is so important with the royal family, and we have seen the royal families in recent history where they've been damaged by whether it was Princess Diana or Charles and Camilla, but normally. They often sort of bounce back from that. But I think this one has particular significance because given the sensitivity and the serious allegation that's been made against Prince Andrew, which again, Prince Andrew has denied it. I think it is worth mentioning. And again, I'm going to reveal my true colours. I would call myself a small R Republican. It's one of those. It's pretty low on my list, if I'm being really honest. But it does put this will I think. I mean, all institutions, will have bad apples. I'm Catholic myself, and the Catholic Church has been quite cloaked when it comes to the horrible child sexual abuse that happened under the leadership of priests. But the Buckingham Palace appears to be no different in my view. It seems quite cloaked, and I think that's why people like King Charles and William have been making this concerted effort to sort of do a rebrand of the royal family. So we saw King Charles reduce the number of working royals. Prince William has got ambitions to make the monarchy sort of fit for the 21st century. But
impossible.
It's well, I mean, I do. I mean, I'm a big L liberal, but I do believe in aspirations and meritocracy. And I think if you're a true conservative, I don't think you would support the royal family because there's nothing meritocratic about. I think Andrew Neil. I could be wrong here. I think he famously is quite Republican.
Let's ask a true conservative, Chris. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you're right about the meritocratic elements, but there is a tension there between kind of our beliefs in meritocracy and in tradition, and it's not always possible to come up with a with a set of ideas and values which are totally sort of perfect and are not contradictory. So in this instance, you have to choose one or the other, traditional meritocracy. And I think, given that this role is mostly a ceremonial role, the king doesn't have any sort of real executive sort of functions.
Well, Chris, sorry,
it makes it pointless then.
Chris, sorry to interrupt there, but I'm afraid I know too much on this issue, and that's one of the myths that I like to bust. And if you go on the Republic's website, they have a full list of the myths. And they rebuff them all, including the idea that the royal family brings in a whole load of tourism. It just factually doesn't, I'm afraid. And they
it's a factor. It is a factor. I wouldn't say it's the only thing. It's a factor. It's one.
Indeed.
It adds to the appeal. I wouldn't overstate that case, but there's lots of interest in our royal family around the world, in America.
But sorry, I was just there is. But I think America like our royal family more than we do is the honest truth. But I was going to answer your point about no power. Well, that depends how there are a set of laws where if it directly affects, if the Parliament is going to bring in legislation that directly affects the monarchy, the king does have a veto. Now, I ask you, Chris, is that democratic? It isn't.
No, but has that ever? Has that really kind of?
It absolutely has, and I'll send you examples, Chris. And again,
in recent years, because
absolutely
the monarchy is ultimately, and we're seeing it with this case, is ultimately regulated. It doesn't have. Obviously, there isn't a democratic, official democratic exercise, but it does have to respond to public opinion, as what we're seeing here. And then the other thing I would say is that historical link with the past as well. So sorry, I'll let Andy come in. But there's this, we have this link going back to the Middle Ages. Obviously, briefly sort of interrupted in the 17th century. But when you watch the coronation, and I'm just fascinated. The chair, the coronation chair, dating back to the 14th century, for example. Did you not feel anything sort of stirring in your stomach apart from maybe the last night's dinner? But did you not feel anything? Thinking that this is kind of like, this is part of our identity. This is part of our history.
But Chris,
this is our link to the past.
Chris, I'll just say this in one sentence and then bring Andy in. Me and Andy have said this in our chats, off air. You could still have, if we sent the monarchy on their way to be private citizens and elected a president, as the Republic of Ireland are doing at the moment, and having very much a contest of ideas as well in the Republic of Ireland, then Buckingham Palace, etc., would still be wonderful historic places to go and visit. I may even go and visit. I like the idea of going to visit the monarchy of the past. I just don't want it. I just don't want it today. But anyway, over to you, Andy.
With the present. And that stability and the fact that it's an apolitical figure as well.
Chris,
the problem with the president is that it's going to be political. It's going to be like, we're going to have like President Angela Rayner. Now if you can't,
if that's who people vote for,
if you can't think of anybody better than that to be as president, then to replace what we have already. I mean, if you're going to replace something, at least come up with something better than what we already have. And if you're going to say President Angela Rayner, President third-rate politician who's failed, whose career's going nowhere, so he's going to take up this ceremonial job, then what's the point? What is the point of changing?
In response to that, Chris, one, like Mathew says, if people want to vote for that, because it talks about President Blair, when he was not particularly popular during Iraq, but he did win 3 elections, so obviously he did have some appeal. And if people want to elect a President Blair, then that's fine. But also there's different models, Chris. You could have the Speaker of the House be the head of state. There's nothing stopping it not being presidentialised. I could see arguments on that. And also on the issue of tourism, I always say to people, I don't go to Versailles and say, Oh yes, it's a beautiful building, but you know what really spoils it? Not having a monarchy still in France, really, really dampens my mood. But I think back on topic, as a monarchist yourself, Chris, because I think there are question marks about how slow Buckingham Palace has been. They've had quite a long time to settle this, and only now that they've started to do something with Prince Andrew. How damaged do you think this will have on the institution of the monarchy?
Obviously, this is not a good episode, and especially the younger generation, it doesn't help make that case with the younger generation. But as we're going to discuss in the next item, democratic institutions can be slow to respond to horrendous scandals as well. So it's not something that is just.
But you can vote them out, Chris.
Sorry?
You can vote them out.
But as I say, I go back to this point. If what you're advocating to replace what we have at the moment is not really any much better, and especially, as I've said, it's just a ceremonial role, then why go to the effort of changing it? Why go to the effort of holding elections for a position that doesn't really?
But Chris, your argument is ridiculous, because in effect what you're saying is that we shouldn't have elections every 4 years to elect these third-rate politicians that form the government. We should just have some kind of autocracy. Is that not the natural extension?
No, because the difference is that the Prime Minister has executive power over policy, and of course we should elect the Prime Minister in that sense. But the monarchy is a ceremonial position that does not deal with policy on a day-to-day basis.
Chris, I thought Conservatives love to go after waste. What's the point of the monarchy?
Right.
They use their powers.
Well, if you have a president, right? There's still You're going to have elections. That's going to cost a lot of money. They're still going to have their residences, aren't they? They're still going to go on state visits. It's still going to cost, isn't it?
Chris, they have one election every 4 or 5 years. The president of the Republic of Ireland has one residence. We're not paying for goodness knows how many. We're not paying for how many. Never mind Angela Rayner. We're not paying. We're not paying for lots of extended family members and all the rest of it. And can I also bust the myth?
I agree. They're reducing it down, aren't they? Can
I also bust the myth of working royals? Because there's another myth that look at how hard they work. Well, again, Republic absolutely breaks that down. They go to one. I think they worked out that Prince William in a month had perhaps been to like 13 events for maybe an hour a day. Well, if you call that work, then we'd all love that work for the money that they get. I'd want a job like that. Give me that job. I'd happily do that. The idea that they do something and work for like 8 hours a day or anything like that is absolute bunkum. So I just won't have these myths be told on this.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, the other thing is that, especially with someone like King Charles, who I don't agree with on everything. I don't like the stuff he says on on climate change and things.
Yeah, he's far too liberal for you, isn't he?
I'm not going to. What was that?
He's far too liberal for you.
Well, I mean, if we can believe the Crown, I mean, the Queen was probably more to the left of Margaret Thatcher, if we believe the rumours, anyway.
Indeed. But also,
they do provide that soft power. So for example, I believe that the King was instrumental in kind of persuading Trump to have a more favourable position to Ukraine. Although with Trump, he does change his mind depending on whoever you speak to. So they do play an important diplomatic role, I think, as well.
And I've been reading this week about the alleged. And I do say the alleged, but some of the alleged kind of business dealings of Fergie, I don't know what to call her now. I guess you can't call her the Duchess of York, but you know, and the peddling of her. I'm not saying anything illegal about this, or indeed about anything, but you know, the tawdriness of her peddling her wares on QVC, and it's all just a bit. It's all just got a bit naff. You know, I think. You know, I think my mum was one of the people that she used to be quite a monarchist, and then became, if not a Republican, at least agnostic, because she just thought these are always put up on a plinth as being morally superior and kind of, you know, blessed by God to be above us all. And yet we've seen that they're just a family that are full of human beings, and a family full of people
they're human beings, and for every one of, you know, a Fergie or Harry and Meghan, you have Charles, you have William, you have Anne, you have Edward, you have Sophie. So you do have I would say, hardworking, dedicated. You have Kate as well. Sorry, we should say Kate as well. You do have very, very dedicated, very highly respected people as well in there too.
I don't like that you lumped Harry and Meghan in with that. I think actually they've done the honourable thing of saying, up with this we will not put, and they've gone to make their own lives. Andy?
I was going to say, you know, I mean, I am like a small R Republican. You know, I do think some of the rules work quite hard. I think I probably have slight disagreement with Mathew. Princess Anne, I actually absolutely adore her. I think she's fantastic. William Kate do a lot of things to do with mental health, which I'm very passionate about. So I think there needs to be credit due. But for me, I mean, people talk about. I mean, I think there was an MP. I think it was one of our MPs who said, you know, what Prince Andrew's done has completely embarrassed the king. And I think what's been lost in this conversation is the victims. You know, because these are people who suffered for it. If these allegations are substantiated. They've suffered. I mean, one took their own life, and I think that's what's that this is the real tragedy of this whole scandal. You know, because you know, I think everyone in all political colours need to remember that victims suffered under under this. So that's kind of my final takeaway about this. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Andy, and that there are a number of, you know, I guess we have to say, alleged victims of well, we know that there were victims of Epstein. Whether they, you know, we have to say alleged people who have considered themselves victims of Andrew, but obviously he denies all allegations. Chris, do you think getting back to the politics of this, do you think that the government will be successful in trying to distance itself from this issue, or do you think in the end it'll have to act?
I think, it will depend on any sort of further allegations coming out. I mean, at the moment, they've managed to do it successfully, I think, although it's still rumbling on, and you know, MPs are still trying to make their case. But I don't think the momentum's there yet for the government to or for this EDM to become a sort of a parliamentary debate and a bill. So we'll have to see. That's a difficult one to predict, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what happens with that. I think there probably will be more to come out, so we watch with interest. You talked there, Chris, about the fact that, you know, democratic institutions have also been seen to fail, and we're going to move on to that now in terms of the grooming gang inquiry and how that is indeed in crisis at the moment. And we've seen so this was the inquiry that was recommended by Dame Louise Casey. It is now trying to make progress, but they've been unable to appoint a chair. They've had a number of victims who were part of it leave the board, leave their part of the inquiry, and be very critical of the Minister Jess Phillips amongst others. And obviously, Kemi Badenoch made it the point of her 6 questions at Prime Minister's questions this week, and it was not very easy for Keir Starmer to answer, because he was trying to make political points when Kemi Badenoch was able to say, "I'm quoting the victims. You should want to listen to the victims." But I think it's also worth saying that because there's the victims aren't one homogenous group that all think the same. There are victims who do support what the government is doing, and indeed there are victims who think that Jess Phillips is absolutely the very best person to be the minister responsible for this. So we need to properly reflect what is going on here. Andy, from your perspective, I mean, again, the victims have got to be central here, right? But it's also fair to say that it shouldn't. How can I put this? I mean, even saying this sounds controversial, but I'm going to say it. It shouldn't necessarily be the loudest of those who have been victims that they should be listened to, but they shouldn't be listened to any more than those that are perhaps much quieter. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tragic that politics is being made on this, particularly for Jess Phillips, because I know she is she's very big on women's safety and safeguarding. She's dedicated a political career on that. But obviously there are questions. I think there have been at least 4 women from that inquiry panel that have left over Jess Phillips. So I think there has to be question marks on her leadership. But also there have been 5 members who've come out in support of Jess Phillips and said they will only stay on the panel if she continues to lead that. So I think it's a lot more nuanced and dynamic. And like I said, I've got a lot of time and respect for Jess Phillips, because she centres a political career when it comes to women's safety and safeguarding. And I always remember the election. It's not related, but the 2024 election where she just got completely hounded by the far left. It was disgusting, and absolutely disgusting, veiled misogyny against her. And I think she was so brave to basically come out at that election count for her seat and to just basically have a laugh at them, and sort of like show face and not be scared by him. So, but yeah, I completely agree there, Matthew. There are question marks about this, and it's a shame because it's the victims who suffer from this. And it's been going on for ages now, and we just need to get, a settlement on this and to start seeing, like, putting ideas into practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Chris, do you take I think I probably said it a bit in gallantly there, but do you take my point that it shouldn't just be those who have perhaps a higher media profile that are listened to over and above others who are perhaps much quieter, but who are also victims and who have their point of view?
I take your point about the fact that people are, they're different people who have different views about the government's handling, but still to have even some of the panel members to express concerns how the government is handling this is still not a good look. And to really satisfy the people's concerns and to satisfy people's objectives in terms of wanting this inquiry to get to the truth and to be successful, then I think the government has to take into account the views of everybody, and that includes people who are concerned about it. It's not a good look. It's especially not a good look considering that Labour had already been dragging its heels over holding this national inquiry. It's not a good look in the sense that the victims are saying that they're trying to water this down and trying to make this about something broader or bigger than the actual original scope of the inquiry. And it's not a good look when sort of Jess Phillips sort of tries to give the impression that that their account, that the victims that have complained, that they're not that they're not, that the recollections of various discussions are different. And when the victims come back and say, well, this reminds me of the original time where the establishment just didn't believe us. So and I do think I recognise Jess Phillips's record and her history, but I don't think she did herself any favours with her performance at the dispatch box the other day. And I just think, I just think Labour needs a little bit more humility, because there's a pattern here where ministers are coming to the dispatch box and they're being very aggressive. They're not fully answering questions, and okay, ministers do that, under all governments, but it's really noticeable, especially, for example, with the China situation, where they're just point blankly not answering questions. I just think a bit of humility and just a bit of self-reflection, and this might actually get them to perhaps get the public a bit more sympathetic. I think this overly defensive posture that they have at the moment is leading to their sort of decrease in popularity, something that we'll discuss later in the programme.
Yeah, well, I mean, I watched that whole session with Jess Phillips, and I'm a big I'm a big fan of hers. I think she's a very much needed kind of working class voice in Parliament, and that there aren't enough of those. And indeed, we'll perhaps talk briefly in a wee minute about Angela Rayner's speech in Parliament this week, her return to the political scene. But I think it's fair to say, and this point was made by Labour members during that session, that there's no other single person in the House of Commons who has raised these issues more than Jess Phillips. But having said that, I do think that she was very defensive in that session. I do think she could have approached the session with a bit more humility. I know that she's quite a rambunctious person, and that's to her credit, and she's had to be. But I'm reminded of what Dennis Skinner once said about the House of Commons, that sometimes it's like a morgue and sometimes it's like a zoo. You have to judge the mood of the Commons, and I don't think she did that particularly well in the session this week. But also, I don't think she should. I don't think she should be. I mean, it may be inevitable that she has to go, but she shouldn't be pushed out just because the loudest voices say she should. That's the only point I'm making. Andy?
I was just a quick comment. I was going to say I concur what you said, Matthew. You pick your battles, really, because she is quite a feisty, fiery person, which I quite enjoy. I like that she's kind of a spades girl, much like some of my favourite just friends, family, political titans. But you have to moderate that, and it did come across as quite aggressive, quite obnoxious, arrogant. And I actually began to saw that in the 2024 election campaign when they were having their debate panels. I don't know what advice they're getting with their communication, but they need to ditch the person they're just giving them really bad advice, because in the election campaign, I mean, I'm a bit of a big L lefty liberal, as you know. So obviously, I want Lib Dems to do quite well, but obviously Labour are probably close to my second choice. But they were just so arrogant and obnoxious, and they were I felt sorry for the Tory panelists there. I thought
never feel sorry for
reasoned
Tory
arguments, and you come across as so arrogant and aggressive. That's a big deal to have me siding a bloody Tory.
Yeah. Never
But he has
feel
a
sorry
point,
for
though, Matthew, doesn't he?
Sorry?
He has a point. He has a point. I mean, you wouldn't get. I mean, Tony Blair, he was very skillful in the sense that he knew.
Absolutely.
They've got to sometimes. I mean, Gordon Brown was like he never admitted weakness, right? And that's what some people on the left, have it in their mind. If we admit weakness, if we admit we got something wrong, then it's game over. Or we're the right people, we're the righteous people, and we can't do anything wrong.
Right.
So,
No,
I
think, yeah.
It's got just some reckon. Sometimes you do have to admit you've made a mistake occasionally. Right.
Look, I mean, this is extremely difficult for the government, because in a number of places where there have been high-profile issues around grooming gangs, this is factually a statement that they have tended to be in areas where there were Labour councils. Now, that's not saying that there's a correlation between there's a Labour council and therefore this has happened, but it's just factually stating that these tend to be in areas where there are Labour councils. And so politically, let's just be honest, this is very difficult for the government. But and when you're a government, especially one as embattled as this Labour government has been over the past year, I'm sure there's a tendency to when these issues come up to want to try and take the easiest path and to try and say nothing to do with us, Gov, instead of the more honourable thing, which is saying even if Labour people are found to have been in some way to have let people down here, we're going to have this inquiry, and the inquiry will find what it finds, and the result will be the result.
We are talking about some of the worst sexual crimes imaginable, and surely party politics and party reputation, surely that has to go out the window, because again, as Andy rightly said, the victims must come first, and these are horrendous, the most horrendous sexual crimes you can think of.
But Chris, I agree. I of course completely agree. But my next question is, who on earth is going to want to chair this inquiry? I mean, I was watching something yesterday when they were discussing this and saying that, all right, the victims don't want a former police constable, a former police person, and you think, okay, you can understand that. But who, in a sense, has clean hands on this? What institution has clean enough hands on this to be able to provide someone who is going to be the chair? Unless the chair ends up being Dame Louise Casey herself, Chris.
Yeah, but probably. I did say at the time, actually, when people called for a national inquiry, I said, do you really want Labour in charge of this? And maybe there should be a kind of an outside inquiry instead.
I would agree. I would agree. It would, at least the optics would look a lot better, because, like I said, I've got a huge time for, it's tragic that Jess Phillips has been caught up in this, but I do have time for her as a minister, given her record. But it might be better to have someone, or even if you're going to have politicians, have someone cross-party. We Lib Dems love cross-party inquiries, but I think this would be an excellent case where actually let's bed the politics and actually do some, get to the bottom of this.
Absolutely. And interestingly, separate from the grooming gangs issue, but I read this week that the what do they call them? The cabinet secretary, the head of the civil service, might be being given the boot, and maybe Dame Louise Casey could become the head of the civil service. Chris, did you see that this week?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when he was appointed, people were saying, well, you're really going to get change with someone who's an establishment sort of creature. Louise Casey's has a reputation for being a bit more sort of independent. It'll be interesting to see if how she might deal with things if she does get the job. But that's interesting. We'll have to see. But there does need to be sort of fundamental, and I would argue there needs to be kind of more outside appointments, because clearly the system doesn't work, and there does need to be a shake-up in terms of how the machinery of government works.
And look, we on all of these things, on that, on Grenfell, on the blood issue, and all of these things, on Hillsborough, we need transparency. And I know the government has brought in the Hillsborough law, and I hope that works, because public institutions who've done wrong need to admit that they've done wrong, need to not try and this is, I'm not speaking now about anything in particular, but I'm just speaking in general. If there has been any kind of cover-up, if people have done wrong, that needs to be brought to the public attention, and action needs to be taken. Let's speak a little bit about Angela Rayner's speech this week. Now, I know that Chris is just going to say that I say this because I'm just a big old lefty, but I thought her speech was very good. I thought it was very look. I look forward to wearing that. I thought her speech was very, very well drafted. I thought that from her perspective, quite rightly, she didn't dwell too much on her wrongdoings, but gave a speech that obviously she knew that her Labour colleagues would want to hear. She even mentioned the word socialist, which you don't hear very much these days on the Labour benches. I thought it was one of the best kind of working class rallying cries I've heard from a senior politician in a very long time. It even brought a tear to my eye. So there you go. We'll come for Chris's alternative version of events in a moment. But Andy, what did you see it this week?
I'm not going to pretend I did. I missed this, unfortunately. But from what you've told me, it's interesting that she used language like, socialist and I find that quite an interesting observation, actually, because it would suggest to me that she might have felt that she probably feels a little bit liberated now that she's out of the government, considering how Keir Starmer's Labour is operating. They try to avoid using the words like working class or socialist. It's always working people, the many, not the few. So yeah, I find that quite interesting that she's just come out basically just being unfiltered and being authentic self. So I do wonder how restricted she must have felt whilst being a government minister, and whether that will set up some traps for Keir Starmer. Will she be a bit of a rabble rouser in the backbenchers? So. Yeah.
Well, funny enough, I don't think she'll be that. I think she hopes to make a return to government, and I think still harbours some, although she's previously denied it, but I think she harbours some ambition to one day become Labour leader and Prime Minister herself.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think she'll be perfectly loyal on the backbenches, but I think she just wanted to remind Labour MPs about her values and the fact that she comes across. I've always said that. Love her or hate her, she comes a bit like Jess Phillips. She's someone who is authentically themselves, and that we need more of that in politics. And people kind of get fed up of the Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer kind of robotic, kind of well manage things better way of doing politics, and actually want characters a bit more in their politics. So go on then, Chris. What did you make of it this week?
Well, I suppose if you're judging this as a piece of as a rallying cry as a socialist rallying cry, something to galvanise very sort of left wing supporters, then I suppose you could chalk that up as a success. However, it was a resignation speech, right? It was a resignation speech, wasn't it? You wouldn't have known that if from Mathew's account, and if you actually watched the speech. She mentioned something at the beginning about having to resign and why she resigned, but that was like in the first few minutes, and then she did her leadership pitch, and again it goes back to the theme about it's clear that in its first year and a half, Labour has messed up hugely. It has made loads of mistakes, and there just needs to be recognition that there has been mistakes made, and Rayner did make a big mistake that caused her to resign, and there wasn't really much of that in the speech.
I mean, I didn't read or listen to the speech, so I'm only going by what Mathew said and now your comments, Chris. But I think, that's the theatre of politics, let's be honest. I mean, when Suella Braverman resigned, I mean, that was, she makes one mention why she resigned, and then it basically became a huge rant about how terrible Rishi Sunak is. That's just I mean, resignation speeches, they're not really there to sort of, I mean, I think an honourable person probably would call attention to their failings, and I think that would be quite good. That'd be quite an honourable thing to do. But they're there for theatre and optics, and to sort of that's just life, Chris. I mean, you're going to be hard pushed to find any recent resignation speeches where they sort of owe up to things.
Well, it was really interesting that she was standing almost exactly where Geoffrey Howe stood all those many years ago when he ripped into Margaret Thatcher. But actually, this wasn't an attack on, certainly a direct attack on Keir Starmer. I thought it was a very good speech. I thought it had clearly been very well drafted. I thought it touched all the right points that she'd want to in terms of appealing to Labour MPs and indeed to Labour members and voters. And I think she'll be back before too long in government. Obviously, she can't now be. She won't be either deputy leader or deputy prime minister. She won't be either of those things. But I expect her to make a return as a Secretary of State, maybe some point next year. I predict that might happen. So I just wanted to mention that. Let's turn to the big political moment of the day that we're recording this, the big political topic, which is the Caerphilly Senedd by-election. And of course, Andy was talking about this for hours last night, so he knows a lot about it.
Still recovering.
He knows a lot about it, bless him. Obviously,
no pressure then.
No pressure at all. But people will no doubt know by now that Plaid Cymru won that election quite comfortably. Reform came second. Now I know they'll no doubt be saying, "Oh well, we've come from nowhere and we're second." Yeah, okay, but actually, let's be brutally honest. They wanted to win this election. They thought they were going to win it, and they're falling short. And they're falling short, Chris, because, and I think this is the most interesting point, is that the broad left, the centre left and left electorate in Caerphilly clearly decided that they were going to tactically vote for the Plaid candidate to keep reform out, and it's successful. And I think that is, as I've tweeted today, I think that progressives need to learn from that. We can keep reform out if we're smart in the way that we vote.
Yeah, I do think it's a wake-up call for the right. I do think that there has been this sense that reform thinks it's going to, it's just going to carry on as it is, and it will end up, with being the largest party or being in government at the next general election, and in some respects, this is a much needed kind of food for thought for the right about how things go forward, how reform campaigns, how reform organises itself, the fact that it does need to have more substance to it. Now we don't live in that part of the United Kingdom, so I don't really know the ins and outs of the campaign. I understand that immigration was a big issue, but this is something that the right needs to reflect on. Although the Conservative vote was very small, and again, there's something there for the Conservatives that really, they again another sign that all things are not well. Put it that way, but it does illustrate that if there is going to be this more unity among the left about how it votes, then the right has to be more organised. It has to come up with good arguments. It has to come up with appealing policies, and there has to be some kind of arrangement between the Tories and Reform UK. I suppose the question that I would ping back to you and Andy is this kind of tactical voting sustainable, or is it just the product of one sort of by-election?
Well, as you know, I mean, I'm very heavily involved with the think tank Compass, and part of their whole thing is encouraging, until we can get rid of the dreaded first past the post electoral system, which we need to do, Chris, is encouraging progressives to be tactical in how they vote. It's the only way to win for progressives in this system. And clearly, it became obvious that Labour were not going to win this by-election in Caerphilly, and obviously that's another big story, is the fact that Labour are going down the pan, even in Labour Wales. So that's another big thing that we need to mention. But obviously, and yet people will say, I'm surprised you haven't already said it, Chris. Oh, well, the Lib Dems lost their deposit and the Greens did. Yeah, it was clearly because, and I'm always sorry to hear that, but it was clearly because those voters were smart enough to know that their candidates really stood very little chance indeed, and that they lent their vote to Plaid Cymru to stop reform, and I'm grateful that they did. And I think that we do need to learn from that. And I think next year's Senedd election, I would, of course, I can only ever advocate a Liberal Democrat vote, and I'd only ever do that, of course, as a party member. But I think we will see people being smart, progressives being smart in how they vote. Andy?
I think because I think the key takeaways that's been in this by-election is about how well Plaid's done, and how how sort of depressed I mean, it's not insignificant. They are still a relatively new party, Reform, and for them to get like over a third of the vote for such in its infancy is quite an achievement. So I don't think we should treat this as being insignificant, and particularly because, like Chris said, immigration has been played up in the area, even though it actually has one of the smallest immigrant population. I think it's like 2.3%, which I always find interesting in those areas. The ones that seem to be the most hostile on immigration tend to have the lowest population. But a lot of talk's been about Plaid's victory, Reform's not be able to take this seat. But I don't think this has been a vote for Plaid Cymru. It was a rejection of Reform, but equally it was also the biggest news story of that night was Labour's vote share. It lost 35% of its vote share from 2021. And that's the biggest story of the night, because rightly said, Mathew, Wales is bankable for Labour. Before then it was the Liberals. The Tories, they struggled to break through Wales. And I think actually it's only been in certain election cycles where it looked competitive. In fact, I think David Cameron was the last one to do quite well in Wales. I think he got 8 or 10 seats. I can't remember the figures now. But that's been the biggest upset. That for me was the biggest upset of the night. Labour's shares of the vote collapsed. And tradition, because this was an anti-reform vote, and traditionally Labour would do well on this. Labour would do quite well. The Progressive Party would rally around Labour. But for them to go to Plaid Cymru shows that they've got no confidence of Welsh Labour. In fact, from an analyst's point of view, this makes it quite difficult, because is it a condemnation of Labour and Westminster, or is it a condemnation of Welsh Labour?
Both.
Or is it a bit of both? And I think for an analyst, I think Labour are going to have to do a lot of unpacking on this one.
Absolutely, and actually, I was listening to someone saying some of the coverage earlier today, Chris, and I just thought this was a really interesting point, that we could see a situation after the Senedd elections next year where, yes, Labour are still in government, but they're the minor party in government for the first time, with Plaid as the major party. Now we'll see what happens, and we'll see what the numbers are. But for Labour not to win for the first time in its history in Wales would really be quite something, wouldn't it? And that would be the ultimate moment of danger for Keir Starmer, right?
Yeah, and I think the elections next year will be sort of crunch time, but again, this could be another sign that politics is fundamentally changing in the way it was roughly 100 years ago. This could again be another indication of a wholesale rejection of what's known as the Uni Party, the Tories and Labour. So again, that's an interesting thing. The other thing as well, you mentioned about the possibility of Plaid forming a big part of the next administration in Wales. Would that serve reform? Especially if there is sort of disillusionment with the next government, that might actually play into Reform's favour at the national general election, wouldn't it?
I think it may well, and I think it's going to be really tricky. I'm so excited for these elections next year in Scotland and Wales, because they're just going to be absolutely fascinating, and I think especially in Wales, where I think it's likely that either Plaid or Reform will be the largest party. I think because of how depleted the Tories will be, it'll be tough for Reform to form a government. And I think it looks like likely government is a Plaid Labour government. But as you quite rightly say there, Chris, they can have a majority and they can govern. But if people have clearly rejected Labour, what would they feel about Labour remaining in administration, even as the smaller party? So none of these things are easy. And I think it's one of the fascinating things about kind of devolved politics. I think in Scotland, it looks as if it
Or we
might be a
could
bit
have
easier.
first past the post
Sorry, yeah.
have one party.
Sorry. Honestly, Chris.
I just want to say, like, I think it does a bit of myth busting here that we always assume Wales is like Scotland. It's progressive, they won't be seen dead voting Conservatives, and yet Reform does pretty well in this in contested seat.
But also,
so I think there's
but
a
also,
lot of
Andy.
myth busting.
Yeah, but Andy, also, when I said this when I was on talk the other week with a Tory person, they were saying, yeah, but Mathew, you're making the mistake of suggesting that Reform are a traditional Conservative party. They're not.
That is true.
They're a populist party that have some policies that are very much on the right, and they have some policies which are very much on what they would perhaps see as on the left, and so. Yeah, I mean, we lump them in with the right because it's kind of easy to do so, but actually there's something more interesting in quotes going on there, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where most people's politics are. I think we are I think as a nation as a whole, I think we're probably a little bit to the left on economics, but probably more to the right on social issues. Which frustrates my uncle, by the way, because he's pretty much a libertarian. He's pretty much do what you want, the state, the markets, but also socially liberal, doesn't care about bathrooms, do what you want, as long as you're not harming no one. So for him, it's quite a nightmare to find a political party that can meet his needs.
Well, indeed, and that's why no political party ultimately is perfectly aligned with you, and that's part of what politics is. But I was just going to say, Chris, that I think in Scotland it looks at the moment, and we'll see, but it looks at the moment as if it will be slightly easier to see an administration being formed, because it looks as if the SNP and the Greens are likely to have the numbers to form an administration there, with a larger group of MPs, but Lib Dem MPs, MSPs, I'll get my words right in a minute, a larger group of Lib Dem MSPs, but probably still in opposition, because we did harbour hopes at one time, and I mean, we'll see what happens. The election hasn't happened yet, but we did harbour hopes at one time that there might be a Labour Lib Dem administration once again in Scotland. But the disastrous start that Labour have had in national government has meant that the Scottish Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, is facing very much an uphill battle. Actually, for the SNP, who were in real crisis for a time, right, given what was going on in the party, and electorally and all the seats they lost at Westminster, it really looks as if they were, headed out of government in Scotland. But Labour in UK-wide government have been the biggest boon that the SNP could have wished for.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see about that. Our politics is much more complicated now. It's much more complex, and it's very difficult to predict. What's going to happen in different parts of the country. It's not just Scotland that's different now. Different parts of the country are different. So there's obviously there's parts where. Yeah, amazingly, Lib Dems are doing very well.
Amazingly, he says. Amazingly.
but also there's a reform. There's a Tory Liberal dynamic, and there's a Reform Labour dynamic as well. Sorry, Andy.
Chris is not wrong. If you look at some of MRP polling, we are pretty much it's just a sea of gold in in some parts of the south. So Chris is not wrong there. I mean, for me as a northerner, I'm in the West Midlands, but I call myself a northerner because I think I'm more culturally north. It's quite tragic, because I would love the Lib Dems to do well in these northern areas. But I'm not going to lie. I think Reform's probably got it in the bag next election.
We will start doing well, and I'm predicting this isn't until 2027, but I'm predicting places like Liverpool with Carl Cashman and others, the Lib Dems are going to make a comeback in those big northern cities. Which brings me to the final topic that I wanted to discuss this week. And Chris was like, really? Do we have to? And I said, yes, we do. And that is Lib Dem council by-election success. Now, I know this doesn't make the headlines like the Caerphilly by-election last night, but both last week and this week, have seen extraordinary Lib Dem success in council by-elections. So last week, I think we won 7 out of 10 with a net gain of 3. This week, we've gained 1 seat from the Tories, 1 seat from Labour, 1 seat from an independent, and held a seat. Be fair, Chris. I mean, ultimately, I know you might say, "Oh, council but these are real elections that people are voting in, and people across the board in these places are turning to the Lib Dem as their preferred party."
Well, it's interesting that, if you look at the media coverage and what the media is focusing on, what various podcasts are focusing on, at the moment there's a lot of talk about Zach Polanski, and there's a lot of talk about the surge in Green membership. There's also a lot of talk about your party and the potential appeal there. But when it comes to actual votes, then it's the Lib Dems that are winning real votes in real elections. So it's an interesting. It's an interesting dynamic there. It's, there's people get hung up on membership numbers, and who can fill sort of lecture theatres and sort of rallies and so forth. But as we saw with Corbyn, he could draw a lot of big crowds, but ultimately he didn't get the votes, and there's similar things happening here. So I suppose the question is how do the Lib Dems kind of exploit their electoral success and make themselves much more of a national sort of presence in terms of media presence?
I absolutely agree with you, Chris, because I will Matthew knows my opinions about Zach Polanski. I'm not particularly kind to him personally, but there's no denying, he's done well. He's had a poll boost and membership number, but membership numbers is beside the point. If you can't go and get your members out through rain or shine, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets, doing canvassing, all the boring stuff. And like you said about Corbyn enjoyed a huge boost in membership, didn't get in the election. And I think the Greens do have this issue that yes, they've got quite loyal followers who will like and repost things, and they've done well in the share of the vote, but they're not able to prioritise that in targeting constituencies and areas which can be winnable. And I do think that I think Zach Polanski will if under current trends, I think he will increase the Greens' number of seats, but I am a little bit dubious that he's going to get the 30-40 target. I think it's going to be way too spread out, much like how the Lib Dems traditionally suffered in general elections. Our vote base was too spread out across the country, which is why we did so well in the 2024 election. But I'm very pleased that the Lib Dems have done well in these by-elections, and again, I think I might be wrong, but the Greens actually lost a council ward. I know they lost it last week, but I think they actually lost another one this week as well. Or I could be confusing the two. So I do think the Greens need to be a little bit careful. I think and also Ed Davies made the point about targeting the Tories. Now we've taken 2 Labour wards now, and I think that says to me, yes, I want us to go after One Nation Tories like my uncle, but equally, I think we can also go after Labour, and I think these recent by-elections is proof of that, and I welcome it.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, viewers will notice that I coughed earlier, and that was because my body just naturally reacts when I have to say something nice about the Lib Dems.
Yeah, you were really, Chris. You were really nice about. But no, the point that you were making, actually, Chris, was absolutely right. That we it's really ironic, actually, isn't it? That we don't get any of the attention, right? We're not the ones boosting in members in terms of membership and all the rest of that. We have no advantage really at all, and yet people are turning to us in real elections. And ultimately, that is what you're in politics for, to win elections so that you can put your policies into practice. And also, I was just going to ask Andy about this, because despite the fact that I often call myself a gob on a stick, I do sit and question myself about the views that I hold and what I'm saying podcasts or on Talk TV or writing for Lib Dem Voice or whatever it is. I don't just do it, write or speak unthinkingly. And so I do question myself, and I'd like Andy's view on this as a fellow Lib Dem. Andy will know that I've been really quite critical of Ed Davey, and praised him for winning the 72 seats. His place in history is secured. But I think that he should be bolder and braver, speak up more, and all the rest of it. But am I right? I mean, I think I am. But am I? Is this quieter, snail-like thing actually proving popular? Do people think that we are now the sensible, quiet alternative?
I mean, I'm a romantic when it comes to my liberalism. I'd love us to go back to the days of, social liberalism and just be fiercely socially liberal and sort of go back to the times of, Joe Grimm and Jeremy Thorpe. Well, I have to mention his name, but Charles, who talked about, we shouldn't be picking fights between workers and businesses, and we should be doing more Scandinavian models and cooperation. But but that's just the romantic in me, and I just like to have a bit more roots in our identity and our philosophy. But I do think it does seem to be working. It does seem to be working for Ed Davey. I think. And that isn't without, there are policies which I think actually can appeal to quite a few One Nation Tories and also appeal to the left. I mean, social care. I mean, my dad made the argument the other day, if you give free social care, you're basically giving a free benefit to quite well-off people, really, because at the moment, I think you have to have a property worth £70,000. So that will appeal to people like my uncle, who's middle class and Tory voting usually. So I think that's an example where he's kind of looking both ways. It's both it's populist for the left because they want free stuff, blah blah blah, but also quite a few middle class leafy Tory voters would probably see appeal to that because it means they're not sacrificing their inheritance in order to get free social care. But no, I think it is working for Ed Davey. It frustrates me because I'm like you, Matthew, would like us to have a bit more of roots in our identity. And I've got my own personal bias, but it does seem to be working for Ed Davey, and I think it is, and I think it's sensible. I know you've got issues with it, but I think it is sensible to go after One Nation Tories like my uncle, who feel politically homeless at the moment. They can't go back to the Tories.
I think we should absolutely be doing that. It would be silly not to, and I do think that we can have a broad appeal. I just wish that on fundamental liberal things we were a bit more outspoken than we are.
Absolutely.
But Chris, this will be interesting to see if this continues. If week after week we see these kind of gains for the Lib Dems.
Yeah, and again, it's it presents a tricky dilemma for the Tories, especially, but for the right as well. I think there are certainly lessons to be learned in terms of, again, the Lib Dems have re-established their reputation for doing well locally and doing well in local elections, and also gaining the trust of people in localities as well. So what and that's what reform needs to do now. It does control some councils, and it really does need to learn from.
I mean, not very well, but yeah.
In terms of how to, well, there's obviously
Matthew, he's been very kind to us. He's been very kind to us about the Lib Dems. I want that trend to continue.
I can't be kind about reform. I'm sorry, I just can't. So, Andy, it's been so wonderful to have you on the pod. We've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too. I thought, given that you had such a late night, that you've been wonderfully articulate in giving us your views. And as Chris said earlier on, thanks so much for all of your support. You were one of our earliest viewers and listeners, and one of the earliest people to support this pod. And I know that both
stuck with us.
Yeah, stuck with us through thick and thin. And yeah, we certainly look forward to having you back before the end of the series.
Thank you both. It's been great. I've had considering I've not had much sleep, I managed to. I think I did okay, and for you to hear that from you, Matthew, makes me feel quite comfortable, and I've enjoyed it. It's been great, and before you sign off, remember to like and subscribe to this video, because you think sometimes forget to do that, and it's very important.
I always try.
Very important.
I always try and remember to say, do all the internet-y things. But folks, don't forget to do all the internet-y things for us, but also do all the internet-y things for Matthew and Andy, because we're a very, very new podcast. So do go and support us over there. So Andy, thank you very much. Chris, you've been really quite reasonable today.
I'm always reasonable. I'm always reasonable. What are you talking about?
So thanks to you, and thanks to you, wonderful viewers and listeners, for watching. Do stay tuned. We've got some really interesting guests coming up over the next few weeks, so do look out for those. And we'll see you next week on Political Frenemies.